So let me start here. We are in a monument to big old TV. The house that Paley built, a gigantic Tiffany box. Are you seeking to disrupt what this stands for, or to aspire to it, and you can't say both?
Both. Well, I think that, you know, TV has had a very good run. And
It was nice while it lasted.
yeah, and we'll continue to make money. But I think that, I mean, the reason why I think, you know, our partnership with A&E is so good is because they're very forward-thinking, not just A&E, but Disney as a whole, about what's going to happen, you know, on mobile, what's going to happen online. How do we do 3 screens, 1 screen, OTT all at the same time? How do we program that? How do we innovate? And actually, I think they're the best at that around today. And I think that right now you're seeing who's going to actually make it, who's going to get there, because it's quite difficult to do. And I think actually, I won't say it's difficult to do. I'll say it's impossible to do. All 4 things simultaneously, and that's why we need help with TV. And TV needs our help, and I think that, as they say in French, union fait la force, together we are stronger. If we can actually learn from each other and figure out, you know, what we do well and what they do well, then we're going to be a force to be reckoned with. And I think that people who are just trying to figure it out on their own or try to do it in-house, it's going to be painful.
But I think there's an opportunity to become the company and the person who makes the internet, digital, the force on its own. I was talking with some of your friends last night that I think there's an opportunity for a Jon Stewart or a Howard Stern or a you to say, screw old media. We're going to make the internet work as the key place. You know, why not do that?
We already have.
Okay.
Thanks for coming out. I think, you know, when we look at our business, and I try to simplify everything because I'm a sort of blunt instrument. But when we look at it, we say we want to increase audience, we want to make money, and we want to make content. And that content has to be sort of less shitty than everybody else's. So if those are the 3 prongs of your stool, then you shouldn't really care where that audience comes from. You should be platform agnostic, which everybody says they are, but they aren't. You're either a TV company that's trying to do an online thing, or you're an online company that's trying to do mobile, or you're a mobile company trying to get in. But you're definitely something. And for us, we want to really be the first platform agnostic company that does TV, film, mobile, online. I think, you know, the deal that we just did with Rogers in Canada is a perfect example of that, where we do you know, a daily mobile show, which is the beginning of the partnership, and then that moves to online, and then there's a TV network, 24-hour free-to-air component as well. And so we're really programming for the first time ever mobile, online, television, and OTT all at the same time. Now, in socialist Canada, it's great because there's a monopoly that you could actually do that
and
with.
You count as Canadian content.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But with the failure of the CBC, Rogers has just sort of taken over as hegemonic media power. And so we can make our experiments up there, but we're trying the same thing in Malaysia, in Mexico. And I think going forward, you're going to see that sort of tie-up between telecom carriers, online carriers, and TV.
Mobile, WTF mobile. I think so far we're seeing it as another content delivery mechanism, which I think is shallow and wrong. It's something that we don't know what it is yet. What do you think it is?
Well, I always say if TV is saying, well, can we go online, then it's over, because the question is mobile. Mobile, it's funny because I travel now without a computer, and the reason why is because I go to all my offices, and our average age is around 25, and nobody has computers anymore. They either have just their phone, or they have a sort of phablet. And you know, more and more video is being watched. We say as goes India, so shall go the world. What does that mean? It means that you have the men own the sort of bandwidth, which is not huge. You have the women owning the TV, cricket and Bollywood respectively. And then you have the youngest population in the world is completely voracious for content, no content for them. And what's happened to the mobile devices is they've been commodified down, much like the PC here, to a $20 pirated smartphone from China. So all the carriers are fighting each other for exclusive content, and there's not a lot of content to be made. So when we saw that, we said, okay, that young people, when we go around to our offices, just have their phones. They watch everything on their phone. And so where the real money is going to be in mobile is data usage with the carriers. The only company that's really got it sort of right, and I think because they had it so wrong before, was Facebook, who literally went 0 to 60 in 17 months. They went from 0 revenue to 60% of the revenue in mobile. And I think they were doing a terrible job online, but they did a great job with mobile. But they still don't, and we're experimenting a lot with them. They're a great partner of ours, but they don't really know what they're doing. We bought Carrot Creative, the top sort of 50 coders here in New York, to try to get ahead of the game on mobile. So we're a lot farther ahead than most people, and we don't know what we're doing. So it is the Wild West. It's the internet 10 years ago.
So they've gotten revenue. They still don't know what they're doing. Where do you think the revenue key is?
The scale is in mobile, for sure.
Yes.
Scale is mobile, hands down. The problem is money. And I think people have been thinking ad supported. And if display and pre-roll suck online, they really suck on mobile. So the real problem is how to monetize it. And what we've come up with is brand partnerships, so producing partnerships, and charging the actual carrier. So it's a great time to be a content creator because you will have an auction. Auctions now online mean how low can they push the price. On mobile, it's how high.
So you're in the syndication business.
Yes.
Between HBO and A&E and mobile carriers,
yes.
You're syndicating content.
And I predict that the mobile carriers will pay the most. They will outbuy everybody else.
So you'll be on one carrier, not another?
Yes.
You'll be a carrot.
Correct.
I'm not sure I buy it.
Okay.
But doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Is there no hope? Well, let me ask it this way: is there no hope for advertising on mobile?
It's difficult because not only is it a bad experience for the user, users have figured out, I forget what the stats are, but there's somewhere around 50 to 60% are using ad blockers.
Right.
And I think I think advertising by and large is stupid, and the idea of saying, no, it's true, because I'm going to make a 30-second spot that works in all markets, for all things, for all, TV and mobile and online, and we're just going to use that spot as pre-roll for this product. We're going to use it in mobile here, and we're going to use it for the Super Bowl. It's stupid. It doesn't work. Right. And advertisers realize that, and I think we realize that, and that's why there's this huge discussion around native advertising. But it doesn't work, and it especially doesn't work for mobile, which is great for us because it means you just have to get smarter. Right. And you have to get smarter about what ads do. You have to get smarter about what your brand wants. You have to work a little bit harder, and you have to, you can't just go to an ad agency and say, make me something with a guy with a mustache and driving a skateboard. Or I don't know, that's not a skateboard.
Or a Cadillac in case it was bad commercial. I guess the reason I did Scrunch Face at the syndication to mobile carriers is that a lot of what's made Vice is your audience spreading around, recommending you. If you're behind walls, doesn't that limit that relationship with the audience and their value to you as marketers?
Well, I think, first of all, it's not going to be for everyone. There's going to be a very few companies out there that can demand the payment of those things. But what we've worked very hard to do in the past few years has been to verticalize our offering. So we have a sports offering, we have music offering, we have a food offering, we have news, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the reasons why we did that is for example, AT&T, Sprint, and Verizon all want to do a news show, right? So you have an auction. Who gets the news show? Now, obviously, you're going to have an online component, and we'll have a TV component. But the daily news show, what we call a capsule, which we're testing right now with Snapchat, actually, I believe the numbers that we already have on Snapchat were the #1 news show in America. But it disappears. But, I think that going forward, we're going to have, let's say, sports with Verizon, who've made a very successful play with the NFL. We're AT&T's agency, so obviously it's sort of a relationship there will happen. But I think going forward, we'll look at, and then there's Sprint, who Massa is trying to buy everything from everyone. So I think you're seeing what's happening. I mean, the fact that Nikesh went over from Google and is now trying to buy youth culture is a great thing for us. But I think if you look at Vodafone has 850 million users. If we do a show on Vodafone, just in Europe and in India, we'd be the largest show of any kind, pushing to all their users. So A, it's huge scale, and B, it's a lot of money. So I think that going forward, that's where we're positioning ourselves. Now it's hard to do, because that's a lot of content,
you can't
and
be
it has to be good.
You can't be commodity.
Yeah.
You've got to be special.
Yeah, and well, it has to be good.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to be good every day.
Right.
And that's hard to do.
Didn't anybody tell you that news is a crappy business?
Yes.
Why are you in it?
Everybody told me it's a crappy business, and that's why we're in it, because there's a huge white space. Because everyone said, as a given, young people don't care about news. They especially don't care about international news. And they like short, snackable, sort of barkery content. And so we did an experiment on YouTube with the original channels concept, and everybody said, you can't do news again. So of course we did long-form documentary news, because why not? And we became the #1 original channel, but we also became the top channel in all of YouTube, which is the most democratic video sharing platform in the world and largest. We have the largest time on site, so we do 28 minutes on average versus 2 minutes for YouTube. We have the highest video completion rate in all of YouTube. We have the best like versus dislike ratio in all of YouTube. So that's led to a great relationship with YouTube and Google that we never even knew of before, and it allowed us to experiment. And our first season on HBO, we took the same stuff we were doing online, and we're nominated for an Emmy. We won last year, no, we won this year, the Emmy for Best News and Informational. We're going to be doing a news offering. I'm not allowed to say that, but we theoretically are going to be doing a news offering with Nancy. And Vice News is now the fastest growing news platform on the web, which is fantastic. You know, we had in 6 months hundreds of millions of video views. We have 1 million subscribers, and everyone who said young people don't care about news,
you proved them wrong.
We proved them wrong, but it's great when it's a given, because we don't have anyone in that space.
Right.
You know, like speaking of lunch, we do a lot of research, and the #1 cohort that goes out and spends money on food, not at the supermarket, but the subways and the restaurants, Gen Y, right? And so we said, name one show that does food that's aimed at Gen Y. There's not one. So we said, okay, we'll do some Gen Y shows. Our big hit right now is called Fuck, That's Delicious. Starring Action Bronson, and they're just huge hits. And we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just programming for the demo. You know, Gen Y went from niche media to general media, nobody noticed. And so when they said Gen Y doesn't care about news, they actually care about news more than any other cohort, because it affects their lives, environmental news or economic news. It affects them in a real way. And they not only care about it, they're completely disenfranchised by traditional media and traditional news media especially. So it's a massive, massive business opportunity for us.
The reason I was so enthusiastic about agreeing with Knight to give you the Knight Innovation Award last night is because you're innovative, let's start there, that you bring new voices from around the world into news, that you, as you just said, proved that young people do give a shit about their well, he started it, so I'm doing it too. Fuck, why not?
It's like Fleet Week up here.
Yeah. Thanks for not wearing a suit. You proved that young people care about their world. And then finally, what the thing that impresses me most, though, is that you brought a human voice to TV. Television became plastic. It became institutional. It became a cult of oddly, paradoxically, a cult of personality with little personality. And you brought real human beating heart, spitting personality to TV. Or what I call it all TV. So let's call it that. What's the essence of the Vice voice?
Well, excuse me, there's all different kinds. My favorite example is Thomas Morton, AKA Baby Balls, who weighs 98 pounds soaking wet. He has terrible dandruff, really bad BO and halitosis.
Luckily, you don't know that on TV, so that's fine.
And he's an incredibly socially awkward guy. And he has become our biggest star, one of our biggest stars, because everybody resonates with him. He's the quintessential sort of nerd. And people are like, wow, if he could do that, I could do that. And we call him Baby Balls because he's absolutely fearless. He would go anywhere. He just went to the deepest cave in the world looking for pharmaceutical plants, prehistoric pharmaceutical plants, because we have the superbugs now. We're in the post-antibiotic world. And deepest cave in the world doesn't sound like a lot until you realize that these guys train, 3 years, 4 years just to be able to go down. They go, a mile and a half down into the center of the earth and all this stuff. And Baby Balls just said, yeah, I'll go, no problem. And I remember the first thing he did, we were watching it, Spike Jonze and I, and he went and lived in the sewers of Bogota. There's a huge homeless population there. And the paramilitary groups periodically try to kill them. And there was a lot, and he's been living with these people, and he's, made relationships with them. And the day he leaves, they pour gasoline down the sewers and set it on fire. And, Thomas, who's incredibly sort of plussed by everything, just breaks down in the cab on the way. And Spike and I were just, bawling. And I think that's the essential thing about Vice is you can resonate with these people, you understand them, they're not superhuman. In fact, they're probably smaller and weaker than you. Yet, when they resonate, when they tell the story, when they're moved by the story, you get moved as well. And I think what this objective journalism gold standard sought to do, I was just in the South Pole, so I have a cough, but I'm not contagious. I'm on the meds. What was I? Oh yeah. So I think when you have that realness, so we sought to sort of to be so objective that we had this sort of voice of God, starting with Murrow and Cronkite. And this is what this means, and this is what everything means, and you should listen to me. And we do the opposite of that.
So today, I think, is Brian Williams' 10th anniversary. Someone said downstairs, right? Is Baby Balls the new Brian Williams?
Yes.
Are you going to make stars?
He already is a star.
Right.
He's a big star online, and he's gonna have a TV show, and we have a lot of stars, not just Baby Balls. I mean, he's my favorite one because he's the antithesis of what no one would ever cast him in anything ever.
That's the point.
And that's why.
How
he's
did
good.
you know he would work?
We didn't.
Okay.
We just thought it was funny. Okay. Because he's a really smart guy, but we were like, wow, if we can make Baby Balls a star, we can make anyone a star.
You could prosecute a ham sandwich.
But because he is who he is, everyone, resonates with him.
You said he'll do anything. He's fearless.
Yeah.
A hell of a lot of your people are fearless. Watching Simon behind the barricades in Ukraine took you there in a way that no stand-up does. Watching the ISIS stuff was amazing. What do you do about safety and your people, not just how you train them or what you give them, I want to hear that, but also places like Reuters now won't take coverage from people who are in Syria because they don't want people to be motivated economically to go there.
Yeah.
So how are you handling in this very, very dangerous year for journalists? We just had the Committee for Protect Journalists dinner last week. It's a terribly dangerous time. Your people do often act fearless. You're their leader. How do you grapple with that now?
Well, I always say I will never send anyone on a shoot that I won't do myself, and those shoots are becoming a little bit more conservative. But, for example, we had great Ebola coverage from Liberia, and we pulled out the team, put them into quarantine because one of our stringers guys working for NBC and Al Jazeera got Ebola. Now he's all right, thank God. But you know, there's also generally, you know, we have 5,000 contributors around the world. So most of the time we'll use local crews. So for example, I used to shoot a lot in Afghanistan, and the Pike guys who we gave the award to last night, very great at sort of security and stuff. And you know, when I was there last, they said we can't do it anymore. I mean, you know, every foreigner, especially journalists, are now targets. So we rely on Pike or Tolo, local news gatherers there more and more. Basically, you know, we do all the traditional sort of go and, you know, combat training and all that business. You know, we have a couple of ex-Navy SEALs who are on staff as part of our crisis team. When Simon got kidnapped, we had a crisis team on the ground. There's 12 journalists kidnapped. We were on the ground in 9 hours. Within 48 hours, we got Simon out, and Simon wouldn't leave until we got all the other journalists out. So we were in the position of getting Al Jazeera journalists out, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a very good response team. We've been through it a lot. What we found works better, and the ISIS embed is a perfect example, that we use local journalists, and we're going to be doing a lot more of that because we empower local journalists. We don't want to be a North American news source. We want to be a global news source. And I think you can't do that if you're just sending me or baby balls everywhere. So he's a Palestinian filmmaker. Obviously there's some sympathy there with ISIS, so he could get in and have a lot more freedom of movement. So I think, you know, going forward, we use local film crews a lot more, and which obviously is a lot safer.
The Post magazine, Dead Media, Vice is how old now? When you brought it back and started rebuilding it?
Dead Media?
When you got rid of the magazine.
I'm gonna go. This is a bummer.
Nah.
Your Dead Media is dead.
You started as a magazine, then you bought it back. The current rendition of Vice that we know now is how old?
Well, it's 20 years.
Okay.
But you know, we bought and sold the same pig many times. But we always owned it and ran it and controlled it. But yeah, 20 years.
So that's my point. Is that's a generation.
Yes.
So here you are, sex, drugs, rock and roll, punk, young people, Gen Y, XZ. Your audience gets older. Do you hold on to them or do you wave goodbye to them? What happens when new people come in with new devices, new tastes, new worldviews? How are you grappling with the future and growth of Vice as people get older?
Yeah, so we were quintessentially a Gen X mag. And then when we started doing video online, we overnight became Gen Y online. And it's funny because I said this the other day, but when I was a kid, there was like, I was a punk kid and there was maybe 10 punk kids in all of my city, Ottawa. And I remember when I went to like a punk, whatever festival, and there was like 250 people in Montreal. I was like, oh my God, we're taking over the world. And you know, you go see bands that maybe 80 people would go see or 90 people would go see, you know, and now when those bands get together, you know, 20,000, 30,000 people go see them. They're these seminal bands that affected every other band since then. And that's the perfect example of what happened to Vice, because we were the older brother and sisters, cool kids. We were the hipsters' Bible. Yet when we went online, we became a different company with a different audience overnight. You know, it took us 10 years to get to 1 million copies of the magazine and 1 year to get to 10 million uniques a month. So we realized that our future was digital.
That's why the old media is dead.
That's it. Yeah. And so Gen Y knows us as a much different thing.
So what about the next gen? What's going to happen?
Well, that's a good question. And you know, everyone says, what's the success of Vice due to? And basically, we kill all our darlings, and every 5 years or so, we have a Maoist purge, and we give over the company to
somebody alert baby balls.
Yeah.
He's doomed.
He is. So we literally give over the company to the intern. So Baby Balls was an intern, and now he's old guard, so he'll be purged. But the every year or so, which sounds, well, of course, but giving a bunch of 23-year-old kids a multi-billion-dollar empire and saying, here it is, go, show us what you're going to do, it gets more and more nerve-wracking. But I think that,
But more and more important.
yeah, and I think what recently happened in France was quite interesting, because France was our worst country. Best country to
You're
go.
not alone.
Yeah, best country to go visit, worst business. We had an editor there who was a junkie, and they wouldn't let us fire him even though he was doing heroin in the office. And it's a sad story, but he ended up dying, and we still couldn't fire him. So a dead junkie in France got a job for life. So so we had a hard time with France. And then recently we launched a news program there, a free-to-air news program, a daily news program that's now the second top-rated news program in all of France. And so they've gone from worst to first, because now everyone's, oh my God, and, Vice is bringing the real news to France, et cetera, on terrestrial TV. And so I think that, what's happening is you see Gen Y is actually waking up and realizing, they have the power. They have the purchasing power. Media for the longest time, and this isn't the house that old TV built, it's the house that the baby boomers built. Because from the 60s till now, baby boomers have controlled media and advertising. And what's happening is people are finally waking up and saying, well, what's the next big one? And it's Gen Y. And they realize, fuck, we don't know how to talk to them, program to them, have any kind of relationship with them. And so for us, that sort of transference from niche to general media is what we're riding.
So you got a lot of money recently, right?
Well, everything's relative.
I say you got a lot of money recently. With that comes great choice, and that's itself scary. Where do you? So you have this great audience, you have this great brand, you've unlocked the youth in ways that old farts can't figure out, and now you have capital. What do you do with it? Where
We
do
had
you go?
capital before. I think what we want to do is we want to turn on the jets and put everybody in our rearview mirror, because we're in the right place at the right time, which is great. We have the right audience, and we realize that we have 5,000 contributors around the world, 2,200 staff, about 500 edit suites. We're going to try to get that to 1,500, 2,000 edit suites. Because what we're going to do with Rogers in Canada, we want to do with Shanghai Media Group in China, we want to do with Astra in Malaysia, we want to do with the Carlos Slim Group in Mexico. So we just need more and more and more. and then why? Because we're making around about 3,000 hours a year now. We want to make around 6,000 hours, because then no one can touch us, right? Then it becomes prohibitively expensive to set that up. And also, people don't have the time. It takes years and years and years to set it. And by and large, every country's got about 20 good people who are doing this stuff. So if we have the 18 of them, then. So I think we're really trying to solidify. Also, we realize that there's a lot of great companies out there, very talented people. There's a real hot market for acquisitions in high tech, but not in media. So we saw a lot of distressed media assets out there, be they magazines, be they web platforms.
You'd buy a magazine?
Platforms. Well, we bought magazines. It's a good business for us. Like, we bought ID magazine,
Right.
and we turned it into an online entity, and now Chanel and Prada and LVMH are lining up to give us, 8-figure numbers. So there's a lot of distressed media assets out there, some of them in TV, that we can go after, that we believe would be, look, HLN is a distressed media asset. It's a great opportunity, because they're doing a very bad job, and we believe we could do a better job.
You want a channel?
I like a lot of channels.
Yeah. You mentioned Facebook before. We talked about Google yesterday. What could and should they be doing for the future of news?
Well, it's interesting. I spent a lot of time with Larry Page, and I was just with him recently for a long time. And he's an interesting cat, as you well know, because he could buy NBC, CBS, ABC with his pocket change. And I've talked to him a lot about that. And they definitely want to change the way that news is done. They're running into old school. So in Europe, for example, the ever-shrinking newspapers have increasing power because they still get people elected in these tiny elections, both domestically and for the EU. And because you have this shrinking, dying business, they're putting people into power that are trying to go after not only Google, but Facebook and
especially Google.
Especially Google in Europe. And, but I mean, they're going after digital platforms in general. And it's suicide. It's stupid. It's like, we hate the future, but it's just old newspaper dudes and old politicians, and you know, Google gets frustrated by that, and as well they should. But you know, I think that one of the things that we talk about is there has to be new news voices out there that are digital news voices. That you know, obviously we use Facebook and we use YouTube, and we realize what they are. And I think that a lot of these newspapers don't even realize what they are. So, you know, if you look at Facebook, it's a referral engine. And you use it as a referral. It's free marketing. And they don't understand that.
Yeah,
so.
I agree. All right, to the room, the best part. Questions, arguments, challenges, curse words, anything. Oh, come on. It's always that first moment. Here we go. Okay, oh, good, over here. I hate that first moment. It's like sitting in the first pew of church and nobody wants to do it. Thank you for bravely asking, Sean.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
You mentioned at the beginning you want to do 3 things, and one of them was make money.
Yeah.
You didn't spend much time in the conversation talking about the business plan,
Sure.
the business outlook. Maybe you could just spend some minutes on. And
Yeah.
you also talked about how you think advertising is generally terrible. So you've removed that from the business model a little bit. Maybe you can just help flesh it out for us.
Well, that's a good question. I get a lot of shit for it, but every time anyone says to me, because you're supposed to just say, oh, content, content, content. You're like, great. But without money, there is no content. And if you don't take care of your money, then someone else will take care of money, and then they'll make the content that's probably going to be worse than yours, but you won't be making it. So I always say, if you hate money, then you hate content. You know, so since we began, we always said you have to have 1 page of ads for every page of editorial with the magazine. We had to make money. We've always had to make money on every single thing we've done. We've never had debt financing, any of that stuff. We always made cash. And the problem in media is that the margins are so high. So, for example, you know, TV's had such a great run. You know, online margins, you know, aren't as good as TV margins. And what we realized is we were making online stuff that we could license to TV at 100% margin. And one of the reasons why we like TV is because we'd already paid for a lot of this stuff. We sort of recut it, which is why edit suites become important to us. Why do we want so many edit suites? Because we can recut for mobile, we can recut for online and TV, and it's not expensive. And by the way, you lose creative control and you lose your margin control, because then somebody else has the ability to jack up the prices. So that's why we do everything in-house, which initially is a lot more painful, but in the long run, you make a lot more money. So what we realized was, like when we started making TV for Gen Y, for food, for example, for Munchies, for Fuck That's Delicious, for example, we went to MIT, and it was like the end of Trading Places when they corner the orange juice market. We were just taking orders because everybody's like, fuck, we want this TV, you know, that you've made, because A, it brings Gen Y back, and B, it's compelling, and C, it's comparatively cheap. So, you know, there's actually a perfect time for TV, because, you know, acquisition budgets are going down, but the market for high-end quality content is going up. So it doesn't make any sense. Whereas if you can make your margin online, and then you know, or pay your price online, and then go and make pure margin when you sell to TV, then that's a great business. And then if you can use mobile to say, well, I'm going to make X amount on TV anyway. So if you want my stuff on mobile, you have to pay a premium on top of that. So what's happening now on the business side of things, if you own the IP, and it's international, you can take it and you can sell it to mobile in India, online in Brazil, TV in Europe, and you're just making money, in all those markets. And that's quite exciting, and that's why, everyone's lining up. We have the United Nations of Media outside in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, because, we're growing exponentially, and that's not going to stop anytime soon.
Sounds like you think TV represents a key part of your long-term profitability, and you want TV to survive. And
well, there's three
thrive.
prongs to the stool there. There's TV, there's online, there's mobile, and then there's OTT. The scale and growth will come from mobile, right? And money will come from online and TV, because no one's really figured out monetization.
Will money come from mobile eventually, besides the model you
Well,
mentioned?
for us, it's coming now, and it's coming now through these deals with the carriers. That's not going to be for everyone. That's going to be for 5 or 10 companies. But that will pay more than enough for us to do our mobile endeavors. However, advertising on mobile is not going to work for most media companies for the next 5 years.
Hi, Betty Cohen. Just a couple weeks ago at this institution, somebody asked the founders of both BuzzFeed and Vox, how come Vice has a better valuation than you guys do? And I thought he was actually comparing apples and oranges.
Yeah, that's true.
And I was curious to know, in my view, I feel like you're about voice and a brand and this platform agnosticness. But how do you compare yourself? How would you have answered that gentleman's question?
No, that's a great question, and I'm sure they get frustrated. Look, I'm friends with Jonah. I think he's doing a tremendous job, and I think what he realized was, you come out of the pond every once in a while when you run a business and you say, okay, I've built, and what he's built is tremendous. Building anything is hard. Going from 0 to one of the top 100 sites in the world, extraordinarily hard. The problem with it is it's an aggregation engine, right? And you can't make money on aggregation. I mean, I go to Silicon Valley all the time, and everyone's telling me, you Vice guys, you're doing okay, but we've got an algorithm that's gonna, and you're like, well, algorithms don't make content. Humans make content for humans to consume. You can aggregate all you want, right? But at the end of the day, you're gonna find out what everybody's found out from YouTube to BuzzFeed to HuffPo to everybody else, is unless you own the IP, and unless that IP is sexy enough that people want to spend a lot of money on it, you're sitting on a bunch of hot air, right? And so Jonah realized, and what he's done is fantastic, but he realized, holy shit, I need to make a lot of IP here. And so what he did is he took his high-tech valuation from building the scale, raised money, and what did he do? He bought edit suites, and he hired a lot of people, and Zay Frank, and he put all the cash into creating IP, which is correct. The only problem that he has, which is what everybody has, New York Times did the same thing, Condé Nast did the same thing, is they say, okay, we've got to do video. What do we do? And they first of all, they build edit suites that George Lucas would use, Secondly, they hire people from TV or film, or God help you, commercials. And because commercial, you get paid $3 million to do a 30-second spot, and you're like, yeah, well, I mean, $3 million to us is our production budget for the year. Just joking. But and the problem is then they start learning, because the New York Times do the most amazing integrated pieces of video and text and all this stuff, and they do 3 of them, and then they sit down and say, okay, how much money did we spend? $20 million. Okay, how much video did we do? 38 minutes. And so I think what you're going to run into, and this is why we raised money, is because to make a difference and to have enough stuff to sell to Sprint here and Vodafone in Europe and Star in India and Channel 4 in England and HBO here and A&E and everybody else, you need thousands and thousands and thousands of high quality hours. Otherwise you're not a business. And what BuzzFeed and Vox and everybody are going to learn is that they're on the first step. When we were in 2006, we were making those missteps and those mistakes and learning those lessons with a lot less zeros, right? And not under the microscope. So we were lucky because we learned earlier on. And what people will find is making a lot of stuff is really hard to do. And making a lot of stuff that's good that people actually want to watch is really hard to do. And then you have to convince brands to let you make it. They pay for it, you own it, and they're not allowed to give you one note. And that's the key that you need to have going forward. And that's why smart investors like Nancy said, oh, these guys aren't going to stop. We've been doubling every year, and which is fine when you're making $1 million a year. But when you're doing $1 billion of revenue, to go to $2 billion of revenue is difficult. To go to $4 billion after that. And what they saw is that our growth isn't going to end anytime soon, because we're just scratching the surface with our licensing model of mobile, online, and TV. Because everyone's lining up to the point where we had to come back from MIP and say, instead of selling TV to the highest bidder, which is a great business model because it's pure margin, we make a lot of money. But we said, well, what's our TV strategy? We don't have a TV strategy other than making money. So we looked at that and said, well, why don't we try to own or participate in the platforms? And I think that that's our strategy for mobile and online as well. So, it's sorry for a long-winded answer, but what these guys are doing is tremendous, but they're on the first stage. And I think where we are quietly is we're further ahead of everybody else, and people could actually see, the trajectory that we have. And my final thing I'll say is, Jonah does a fantastic job of leaking memos, and and they leaked them because you can't ever. It's a leaked memo. You can't ever actually get a comment on them. But and the memo was oh, BuzzFeed's going to hit $100 million this year, which is a fantastic achievement, and we're budgeted for next year to do $1 billion. So I think you see that there's scale and then there's money, and you have to have both.
So your real asset is your content creation and quality.
Correct.
Much more than just virality.
We have zero aggregation. We do everything soup to nuts, and we believe that in the long run, owning that IP and licensing that IP will make you a lot more money than display ads or pre-roll against something that you've aggregated. And aggregation is also just if you look at HuffPo, how much did they alter the article? Did they alter it enough? I mean, they've got to have 100 running lawsuits against them at any time, and it's just not a sexy business.
You have the same level as a Hollywood studio.
Yeah.
You own it and distribute it.
Yeah, and we kind of had de-risked it. I mean, the problem with a Hollywood studio is they get one hit out of every 10, and those 10 have. It's very interesting because we actually went to Hollywood, and we said, why don't you do it a different way, where you do your programmers for this amount and you de-risk it, because we figure we can make about $5 or $6 million on any film. So if you just did $5 or $6 million thing, deferred all costs, then it's a scratch and win card with a free card every time. And you can tell how I learned my business. And then when you have the hit, then you put it into the distribution, which is all they really have anyway. And the top guys all love it, and then it gets into sort of, we wouldn't even give this, Tony Scott or Ridley Scott or whatever, this one of them's dead, I know, but this deal. I mean, that was an actual quote, and you're like, well, I don't care. I'm not like a guy saying, please,
You're not in the
make a movie.
blockbuster business. You're building the company as a
Yeah, we wanted to sort of
machine.
reinvent how films are made, and also we had just a long line of talent who were saying, I'll defer. I want to be a partner on the film, so you don't have to pay me anything. I'll take back end. And we're like, well, this is just a great model, and so we'll see if that takes hold.
You're making films.
Yeah. Well, we already make films.
Yeah,
I mean, we made about
more.
10.
You're gonna,
But now, yeah,
double down on that
Yeah.
over here.
Hi, Scott Singer.
Hi.
Are there any U.S. media companies, other than perhaps HBO and A&E, that are kicking it in digital and mobile? And as well, from the carrier perspective, who do you think are the most progressive, whether they be domestic or international?
Well, on the carrier perspective, I mean, when Guy Lawrence was at Vodafone, we were doing all of the content for Vodafone globally. So they were ahead of the game when he was there. That's why we have the relationship with him now. He's running Rogers. I think Rogers are very progressive. They can be, again, because they're the monopoly. So I think, obviously, Televisa in Mexico, there's a bunch of telecom groups that are very progressive. The interesting thing about the second or the first part of your question, who's doing well on the tech side? I think there would be an obvious answer if anyone was doing well. It would be like, well, obviously NBC is killing it, but there isn't, and so there's your answer. I think Netflix has done a tremendous job. What's interesting there is I can't believe Reed still has his job, because no, seriously, because I invested in Netflix, and it was a great company and everything. And my wife was a huge ambassador, and so she gave Netflix to all the family for Christmas and all that stuff. And when they split, and went from 380 to like 60, you're like, well, how do you keep your job, right? And the fact that one show took them from 60 back to whatever it is now, 420, I mean, it shows what a good job. And by the way, they're giving no numbers. So just on anecdotal, word of mouth, just on buzz, just on hit making, they built something like $18 billion of market cap off one show. So how much are you paying Kevin Spacey? Not enough. So I think, you have to look at, Netflix kicked HBO in the ass to get Go and and crank on Go, and they're causing a lot of disruption. They're trying to outbid people. Now Amazon Prime's trying to get in there. So I think everyone's trying to follow Netflix. So if you want to talk about a true success story in tech and media, I think
Pivoting.
I think it's Netflix.
Great job pivoting.
Sorry?
Great job pivoting
pivoting. Yes.
away and
Great.
getting away from that
and by the way, what did they do?
male business. Yeah.
They created their own IP. Rather than selling other people's shit, they're like, we're going to create our own stuff. And people were like, oh, not only can they create stuff, it's going to be good and create audience. That's worth money. So I think that if anyone's looking at what they should be doing, I would look at Netflix and say, you've got to get your tech right, but at the same time, you've got to get your content right. And the interesting part of Silicon Valley is they hold content in contempt, and Hollywood holds Silicon Valley in contempt. They're just like, well, give us some money, we'll make the thing, we'll get Brad Pitt, it'll be amazing. And so, when they actually meet and do well, it's funny because Silicon Valley has stars in their eyes, like anything to do with Hollywood, so they can be duped. But at the same time, they just really don't want people to do anything. Because when you're like, well, we're going to get more people, we're going to have more, contributors, and we're going to have more, and then they're like, no, let's just figure out some. And so I think it'll be an interesting space, and I think you're going to see things come up like HBO Go or Netflix or various things that we're doing with A&E that are going to be on a big scale. The interesting thing about Netflix as well, it's going to be really hard to replicate that.
Yes.
What do you think about CBSN? Sorry about that. Just to follow on.
CBSN?
Yeah.
Jeff Fager is a great guy, and what he's done with news has been fantastic.
But
I mean, look at 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes used to be the greatest news magazine ever, and now it's sad and tired, and they steal our ideas. But I think that, look, I think CBS, NBC, ABC, I think they're in a real tough spot. I was at some dinner, and some, I think it was NBC was there, and they said, well, we're margin negative. And I said, I don't know what that means. You're losing money? NBC's losing money? But when we make money with Universal and things and little, I think somebody from, I don't know, one of the offshoots that makes money is here. But if you're one of the 3 free-to-air who've owned TV in this country for 60, 70 years, and you can't make money, you shouldn't. You should go away. Because if you've had that position of power for that long and you can't make money, you're doing something wrong.
Vivian.
Vivian Schiller. You seem to be using the terms content, IP, and IP to mean exclusively video. Do you see value in your business? It struck me that when you talk about that, you then immediately start talking about editing rooms. Do you see value? Do you consider valuable IT as things other than video, like words or
Sure, but words are harder to sell.
photos, things like that?
I think video, and one of the reasons why we're successful is we're always a little bit ahead of the accepted metric, which is not good. You should be a little bit behind the accepted metric. For example, Jonah with BuzzFeed is great at touting his numbers. The problem is all he has is O&O, which means, so I have my O&O, which is much less than BuzzFeed, but if you add my YouTube, if you add my TV in my 34 countries, then it's exponentially bigger. What we had to realize is that it doesn't matter if you own the eyeballs, it matters if you're getting paid for the eyeballs. But yet, everybody still cares about just that O&O metric. So, to go back to your question, what's the big metric now? Engagement, right? And engagement is video, because video, you stay and you watch, and by the way, it drives data a lot more than words, et cetera, et cetera. We started as a magazine. I love magazine. We have a huge editorial team. We do a lot of words, a lot of pictures. Much more difficult to build a business model off of licensing articles and photos than video. And to go back to this guy over here, I'm scintillating, I know, is someone had a little bit too much chicken. Is that we look at it and said, okay, if you take video, you can put that into mobile and get paid a lot of money because not a lot of people are doing it. You can do various things with YouTube, for example. You can put it on TV. You can make feature films out of it. So you can take that one piece of content and put that into pretty much every country in the world, in every platform and every screen. You can't do that with words. Words are words, that's it.
And the information inside of it is easily commodified.
Yes.
Once we know information, it's known. Last question. I'm still imagining the meeting of you and Larry Page, the meeting of the minds, and wish I were a fly on that wall.
He's much smarter than me.
Bullshit. You're both smart. What advice did he give you for your business, and what advice did you give him for his business?
Well, since my chief of staff is there, his first advice was get rid of my admins. See ya.
Goodbye. Tell the balls guy on the way.
No, he's a very interesting guy, and he's a very, very smart guy. And we were sort of agonizing, and obviously he has a lot more of this to deal with, but we're going to give away something like $800 or $900 million worth of equity to our staff. And I think that in Silicon Valley, people come out of college knowing what the strike price is. They know what round it is. They know, and in media, we don't really have that. And I don't know if it actually works. I don't know if giving people millions and millions of dollars does anything to make them work harder or to, I think having a mission and having a cult, that people believe in does. But we were sort of agonizing over it, and he was saying, if I had to do it all over again, I would do it not for profit, where we would profit share with everybody, so that every year you would see the upside. And I think when he looks at stuff, he looks at he completely de-stratifies the status quo. He completely starts at zero. And I think that because we've been in Williamsburg and our ignorance was our best ally, because we didn't know about TV, we didn't make those mistakes of hiring people. Instead of hiring people that were expensive because we couldn't afford them, we would go to the tech schools and say, give us your best shooter and your best cutter, and then Spike would run a school that would then train them how we do our storytelling. And I think that where he's really smart is that he'll just start from scratch. Also, he also believes well, that's a $0 million problem, meaning if you put $0 million into a problem, you're not going to fix it, whereas if you put a couple $1 million, generally, you see some movement. And I think that, you know, we think a lot alike now, saying, okay, for example, the Knight Foundation Award, it's the greatest thing ever. You find, and now, you know, you're able to give money to journalists that don't have any money that can do these incredible things. And when you look around, you're like, well, there's 50, 60, 100 groups that are just doing tremendous stuff. They have no money. They're completely sort of out and doing these things on a limb. Why don't we give them more money? Well, we should. And then guess what? You give them money and you help them, and then you get great content in return, but also you have media in many countries. Afghanistan won't have media because there will be a civil war and it'll just become a black hole, and what will come out will just be whatever the powers that be want you to hear. It'll just be propaganda. The Taliban are cutting everyone's heads off. No, the Americans are the great Satan. It'll just go back to whatever. And so for us, when we look at journalism, we say, well, if we're going to do it, we should do it. And if we do it, then we should you know, kick out all the rules and give these people money so that they can go do these things. And that's our biggest challenge now, is going forward, is going to Android and going to, you know, GoPro and going to Samsung and iPhone and saying we need 20,000 phones with editing in there, and people can shoot and people can do it on the ground because we need this, you know, and they need this, and by the way, humanity needs this, because otherwise what you have is Russia Today and CCTV and Fox News.
Shane, thank you for your generosity last night. Thank you for today, and thank you for Shake It Up TV.
Thank you.